Good morning. If the joint Metro North and Long Island Railroad Committee meeting could come to order, please. Are there any public speakers?
Yes, we have one public speaker. We ask him to please adhere to the 2-minute time limit. The speaker is Murray Bowden.
Thank you.
There's one set of rules. You want me to follow the rules? I want you to follow the rules. The red box at Roaring Brook is illegal. Blowing the train horns at 125th Street is not required. This committee needs to look at the president of Metro North Railroad, ask why they're buying married pair, which are extra equipment, when everybody else is buying open cars. Andrew Saul's right. You're not paying attention, and it's this committee's responsibility. It's this committee's responsibility to immediately get a new president for Metro North. I go to a railroad station, there's a PA system that says there's a train coming. Why are you blowing the train horn half mile up the road? Nobody on the platform can hear it. It is this committee's responsibility to look at those things and say, why are we doing things that were useful 50 years ago but not today? And unless this committee does something about it, you're going to have safety issues and you're going to have crashes and you're going to waste money on buying cars you don't need and testing equipment that you don't need. You need a new president of Metro North, and you need a new president immediately.
That concludes the public speakers.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of our May meeting? Second. Those in favor? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Are there any changes to the work plan?
Yes, there actually is one change to the Metro North work plan. The biannual report on the M9 procurement is no longer included in the Metro North work plan because Metro North has elected not to exercise the option in the M9 contract, so it will be Long Island item only.
To the Long Island?
There are no changes to the Long Island Railroad's work plan.
Thank you. In that case, we'll have the Metro North report first, please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Metzger. I want to first provide some important updates on a number of matters that are of interest to the committee. Wanted to let the committee know that Glenn Hayden and I and the PTC team traveled out to Pittsburgh to visit with the system integrator earlier this month. It was a productive meeting. We got to spend one day with Bombardier staff and then another part of the day with Siemens staff. Got to visit their facilities, actually see some testing in action in the test lab. We still have concerns in terms of the resourcing that's being made available for this project, but it was actually a very good visit. We got to spend a lot of time with senior executives. Long Island was there at the same time as well. It was actually gratifying to see them actually run testing in our lab and seeing it go well. We continue to monitor the progress very closely on this very important project, but wanted you to know that we feel like high-level visibility out there is very important in order to keep the schedule going. We have a PTC update later on in the agenda for today, but it was a good visit, and we'll probably make more before the year is out. I'm proud to announce that last week, APTA awarded Metro North its very coveted Gold Award for Safety for our TRACS program. Together, Railroads and Communities Keeping Safe. Justin was out there in Denver accepting the award. I want to give a special shout out to the Office of System Safety for the wonderful work they've done in getting this program off the ground in a relatively short period of time. Since its inception in 2016, TRACS has reached 191,000 people. At least initially, we've focused primarily on rider safety, grade crossing safety, and trespassing. But in 2017, we expanded the program to include campaigns about emergency preparedness, gap safety, and bridge plate safety. We continue to expand in 2018 to include suicide prevention partnerships, which is obviously an issue for both railroads. Earning this award, I'm very, very proud of this award. It shows Metro North's intense focus on safety. So again, I want to thank all the people in the Office of System Safety and Justin for his leadership in terms of this award. While I'm thanking people, I want to thank my staff and my team for work that's been done on 3 capital projects which recently came to completion. The first is, and Susan, this is near and dear to Susan's heart, the construction of a mini high-level platform at the Port Jervis station to help accessibility for our riders who use wheelchairs or have mobility-based disabilities. The team that was working on the replacement of the pole line up in the Upper Harlem, these were poles that were damaged in some of the March storms. It was a concerted effort for, I think, 8 weeks to be able to replace this pole line. Required emergency busing, which was a tremendous inconvenience to our customers. So I'm very gratified to say that that busing is no longer needed. It was a tremendous effort to support the busing. So it wasn't just the people who were actually doing the work on the pole lines, but multiple departments actually supporting the busing during that period of time. So I want to thank everyone for pulling together on that project. It was really quite an accomplishment. And finally, just this past week, we completed the replacement of the west side staircase leading up to the platform at Harlem 125th Street from the street level. And we're now going to turn our efforts to replacing the east side staircase. I was not here last month, but last month when Sue sat in this chair, she talked a little bit about crowding conditions that we're having on the Harlem line as the result of the schedule change that went into effect March 18th. As you'll recall, that schedule change was necessary to be able to move forward with the White Plains project, and that's actually happening now. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of the schedule change has been some crowding in the off-peak on Harlem line trains, and it's been noticeable. And to a certain extent, it's been exacerbated at White Plains Station because of the closing of the southern end of the platform to be able to start that work. So we had crowded condition on the trains, and then some crowding on the platform at White Plains. So I asked our operations planning department to take a look at this issue to see what measures we might be able to put into place to mitigate some of the crowded conditions that we've been experiencing. So based on the counts, we've been doing a lot of counting to sort of get a handle on the situation and what trains were experiencing crowding conditions. 2 trains, train 581, which is the 7:59 p.m. local from GCT to North White Plains, and train 683, the 8:53 p.m. express to Southeast with a connection to Wassaic. Both of those trains were experiencing quite crowded conditions, and as a result, we increased both of those trains from 6 cars to 8 cars. In addition, we're trying to put into place a couple of other measures to be able to alleviate some of the crowding on other trains because we're seeing it sporadically. We've been planning and transportation have been coordinating their efforts to reinforce to our train crews that all midday and evening trains on the Harlem line that have 8 cars or fewer in the consist must operate with all cars for service, so there'll be no deadhead cars on those trains. Crews will also be making announcements informing passengers if there are seats available towards the middle or the rear of trains, which tends to be the case. And third, effective this Wednesday, we're going to be reducing the number of quiet cars during weekday off-peak periods from the current 2 cars to 1. This is intended to encourage people to sort of spread out on the train. We've been having a lot of bunching, and having 2 quiet cars at the end has been exacerbating that problem a bit. For consistency, we're making this change on all 3 lines. There will be no change to the quiet car program during the peak periods. This is just off-peak as a way of dealing with the off-peak crowding, and we're going to keep an eye on it to see whether it works and is effective. We're going to continue to monitor ridership, and we will make additional adjustments as necessary, but this is our first steps to try to alleviate some of these conditions. As Sue mentioned last month, May service delivery was very challenging, especially during the PM peak, and our trains operated below goal at 91%. Year-to-date on-time performance is above goal at 93.1%. We've been experiencing a higher number of 6 to 10-minute delays in the off-peak as the result of our infrastructure work. West of service has also operated below goal at 90.5%. As we mentioned at last month's meeting, we are continuing to pursue measures to mitigate the service impact on our Pascack Valley Line customers of New Jersey Transit's decision to temporarily reduce train service system-wide, including 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. peak train. We have requested the New Jersey Transit commit not to cancel the remaining express train for the duration of the service reductions. Asked New Jersey Transit to accelerate restoring the 2 canceled Pascack Valley trains before the end of the year. We are cross-honoring Pascack Valley Line tickets for the duration of the service reductions on the Hudson-Harlem lines, Haverstraw-Ossining Ferry, and the Port Jervis lines. And we're also providing reimbursement to Rockland County for Pascack Valley Line ticket holders who travel on the TZ Express buses during this period. We're also exploring options to invest the funding that we will be saving by not paying for the 2 express trains into transit projects that will benefit Pascack Valley Line customers. Last week, a number of us, including Susan Metzger, Carl Wartendijk, and Randy Glucksman, met with County Executive Ed Day and his staff to talk about these issues and to hear their suggestions in terms of further ways to mitigate some of the impacts that we're having, that the Pascack Valley Line is experiencing as the result of these service reductions. And this continues a work in progress. Just a quick note, as a part of Amtrak's continuing infrastructure renewal at Penn Station, since Memorial Day, multiple Amtrak trains have been running into GCT. This program will continue up until Labor Day, September 3rd. The Amtrak trains have been integrated into our operations south of Spuyten Duyvil, and up to this point, we've really seen no operational impact as a result of the Amtrak service into GCT. Lastly, I just want to sort of give you a little bit of a teaser. As you may know, I think you know, Metro North has had a 5-year strategic plan in place for about 2 years now, about 2.5 years. I've been president here for about 3 months now. I was acting for a bit before that. And we're in the process of integrating the existing strategic plan into a larger customer-facing corporate plan. We'll be unveiling it probably in the early fall, right after Labor Day. So I wanted to let you know that that work was in progress and to promise more and better detail at some point in the early fall. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. In that case, do you have questions? Randy.
Just an FYI, as far as the agreement not to cancel our trains, this past Friday night, the Evening Express train 1629 was canceled by NJ Transit.
Yeah,
this past Friday night.
Yeah,
no excuse given, just it's simply canceled. Use the next train.
I mean, we've discussed. I mean, the frustrating thing about this is that we've been discussing for some time the crew shortages that have been really plaguing New Jersey Transit for some time now, and it's been a hardship for our riders. And we had a very long conversation about that with County Executive Day last week. It unfortunately takes a while for that situation to be remediated, but we continue to work closely with New Jersey Transit. My understanding is on train 1616, they're going to be increasing the consist size as of tomorrow, which helps. So, unfortunately, it's every little bit helps at this point in time, but I certainly feel the pain of our Pascack Valley Line riders, and we're continuing to work as closely as we can with New Jersey Transit to try to mitigate the pain as much as we can.
Any additional questions? May we have the safety report, please?
Good morning. The safety report can be found on page 42. The customer accident rate is nearly 29% lower than the previous 12 months. The employee lost time injury rate is down nearly 2% versus the previous 12 months. Our community outreach program TRACS reached 10,500 individuals in April, bringing the total for the year to over 29,000. And we held our second annual Safety Excellence Awards on Thursday, May 31st. The event recognized Metro North employees and groups that made safety their top priority and have proved through their work that safety makes a difference, impacting both our people and our customers, key drivers in our strategic plan. And finally, on Thursday, June 7th, we participated in International Level Crossing Awareness Day. We distributed safety materials at grade crossings in New York and Connecticut and reached nearly 2,000 individuals. This concludes the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Hearing none, may we have the Long Island report, please?
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, everyone. At Long Island Railroad, we're coming off a nonstop 10 days of supporting of major events, in addition to our daily operations, where we played a critical role in a number of local and national events in New York City and on Long Island. We kicked off with the Subway Series at Citi Field, and on Saturday, June 9th, we managed heavy ridership to the Belmont Stakes, where fans witnessed only the 13th Triple Crown winner in the 150th running of the Belmont Stakes. This was followed by Long Island Pride at Long Beach, the Puerto Rican Day Parade on Sunday, June 10th, and then beginning Monday, June 11th, the U.S. Open at Shinnecock was underway and saw some large crowds throughout the week, culminating with the final round yesterday. All told, I'm glad to tell you that we provided over 41,400 rides, counting both directions, for these special events. On Saturday alone for the U.S. Open, we saw 23,000 trips to and from Shinnecock Hills. And I want to thank my staff for their hard work in preparing and executing safe trips for fans and commuters throughout our whole system. This is not to say we did not face challenges. In the early afternoon on Saturday, June 9th, one of our signal components at the Queens Interlocking just east of Belmont failed. In leading up to our busy weekend, our engineering team inspected and tested all critical components along our main line and along the tracks to Belmont. This circuit board, which failed, serves the communication system for the main line as well as Belmont. It was tested thoroughly during normal operations, peak and off-peak, and even visual inspections after identifying the malfunctioning circuit board did not show which element of the board failed nor why. That is why we have sent it back to the manufacturer for root cause analysis. And unfortunately, while some fans traveling in the early afternoon were delayed getting to Belmont, thankfully our protocol and preparedness for that event dictated that we had track and personnel staged at the Queens Interlocking, and were able to respond immediately. We were able to begin moving riders under emergency control while working to identify the cause. And while this meant a slow speed, without the preparation, we would not have been able to get our riders to Belmont in time to witness history. And ultimately, we took local control, we identified the circuit board, and we restored full control prior to the PM exiting crowds. We recovered before that PM rush, and we safely moved over 23,000 fans back to Jamaica and Penn Station before 10 p.m. So to ensure improvements in the future, we are reviewing our communications both internally and externally, and we're doing this with senior staff, and we're doing this with staff at all levels. I've discussed with our senior management the procedures for these instances, and we are deconstructing each level of internal communication to ensure more seamless communication across sectors so that our customers can receive more real-time information and updates that they deserve and that they expect. This is a critical part of the strategy that I presented last month and the direction that I will continue to give to staff. And when it comes to system repairs on the Long Island Railroad Forward, we are making good progress as promised. We've completed repairs on 2 key switches, and no failures have occurred since at those locations. We've added 2 additional switches, moving down the list of our most problematic components in the next 6 months that we plan to repair. Track circuit inspections at our busiest interlockings are underway, and we're making progress with PSE&G and have replaced 37 of the 79 poles that were identified for replacement and looking to accelerate for completion this year. We're also continuing to implement our system safety-wide initiatives with 150 grade crossings where delineators have now been installed throughout the system. This marks more than 50% of our 296, and we will be done well before the end of the year. And on June 7th, International Level Crossing Awareness Day, we launched a successful pilot with Waze, incorporating warnings as drivers approach our crossings to avoid accidental turns onto our tracks. We're receiving feedback from customers on how notifications are displayed and hope to optimize this program further. This is an important partnership as we aim to avoid dangerous situations with vehicles on our tracks. I'm also proud to report that since this initiative began in May, we've had no cars anywhere on our track system-wide. And I believe we have a brief video showing the warning notifications when drivers approach our crossings.
Watch out, hazard reported ahead.
We believe this will be a very critical component to aiding drivers as they cross tracks, being able to identify and more clearly point out to the motorists as they pass over our tracks safely. So the Long Island Railroad involves local school districts in promoting safety awareness each year as well by inviting students to participate in our annual Long Island Railroad Safety Contest. One winner is chosen from the elementary, middle school, and high school levels, and this year's high school essay winner was Wyandanches High James Gustav, a 10th grader. We brought him in to shoot this public service video, which we are also happy to share with you today.
Puts too.
Hi, I'm James Gustav of Winans High School, and welcome to today's Safety Focus. I don't have to tell you that we live in a very busy world, but being too distracted when you're near train tracks can cost you a lot more than time. It can cost you your life. The average train weighs about 200 tons. At 55 miles an hour, it can take up to a mile for it to come to a stop. People are certainly no match for a moving train, which is why the only safe place to cross the tracks is at a grade crossing. There are almost 130,000 public grade crossings in the U.S. That's a lot of grade crossings, but they are there to help you avoid disaster if you obey the warnings that they provide. According to the Federal Railroad Administration, there were over 8,600 railroad accidents last year in the U.S. While that number may be lower than the year before, it's still 8,600 too many. But getting that number down to 0 is possible. And it all starts with you. If the warning lights are flashing, and the bells are ringing, and crossing gates are down or are coming down, don't even think about driving around or walking under them. The Long Island Railroad partners with MTA Police to educate the public at the crossings themselves. It's called Operation Lifesaver, and it's had some great results. But it can't reach everybody, which is why you always have to be mindful of approaching trains when you're near tracks. They're much bigger than us, much faster than us, and they always have the right of way. This is James Gustav for Safety Focus, reminding you that you only have one life. Don't cut it short by looking for a shortcut. Your life is worth the wait.
I don't know about everyone else, but maybe a future employee for us here. So while we're focused on operations, focused on safety, we're also focused on the comfort for our riders. Our enhanced car cleaning program has also received positive feedback from customers and will continue to dispatch more appearance maintainers throughout our system in the upcoming months. Further, 65% of our fleet now has GPS equipment installed, and our team is underway configuring the location data to better push out real-time information for our customers. I'm pleased to also say that the first in a series of customer appreciation programs that we plan to roll out has proven a great success. Through Summer Saturday's initiative, we increased family fare tickets by 29% on our first weekend. That's 3,462 riders. And on the second weekend, we saw a 64% increase in the second weekend. This weekend's ticket sales will be available soon. And as summer continues to heat up, we expect riders will continue to take advantage of this program for getaways and hopefully leave their cars at home. In addition, we've also received very positive feedback on the Atlantic ticket. As of last Wednesday, we've sold nearly 5,000 tickets. And then this month, we've launched our Customer Conversation Series, hosting one forum in Nassau at Adelphi University and one in Suffolk County at Islip MacArthur Airport. Commuters had the opportunity to meet our senior management from all divisions, ask questions about capital projects, safety initiatives, operations, and public affairs strategies. We heard some great feedback from riders at each of these forums, and we're working to address concerns across the board. Beginning next month, we'll begin our Meet Your Station Manager program. Our customers will have a dedicated time to meet their station and branch line managers to answer questions and provide feedback at a more local level. This is a great opportunity for both customers and community engagement. And as I set out last month, we continue to base every decision we make on our riders' safety and convenience. Sorry. This is a guiding philosophy and will continue to govern our work as we restore the system and make it worthy of our customers. Thank you.
Are there questions? Commissioner Mordler.
First, I'd like to congratulate you on the Atlantic ticket. On behalf of Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz, we look forward to a Bronx ticket on the Metro North Railway. You're lagging. I have one question for you, Mr. Eng. How are you doing on the repairs and the refitting on the Hicksville station?
Those repairs are progressing. We've been working to try and finish them earlier. Right now, they're scheduled to be done, I believe it's this fall. Chris, is that correct?
That's a slippage from the original June date. When is it scheduled to be done?
August.
I guess I lost that bet. I had stayed with the representation that you were going to meet your goal, your predecessor's goal. I guess we aren't. Thank you.
I thought the PSA was great, and that partnership with the local high school and middle schools is fantastic. Do we have a similar partnership, Kathy, with Westchester schools?
We do. Our TRACS program, I mean, I used to work at Long Island, so I want to give a shout out to Long Island's TRACS program. Long Island's had a TRACS program for years, and we put ours into place a couple of years back. And a good portion of it relates to partnerships with schools. So we go to high schools, driving schools, preschools, schools of all levels to try to teach students very young about the importance of rail safety. We don't have a comparable contest, but our program also partners with schools really at every level throughout the territory. And we're always, happy to hear requests for us to come out. That's what the program does, is go out to different kinds of settings to be able to teach young students about the importance of rail safety.
Yes, Vinny.
Not really a question, just more of a comment, if I could be selfish for 30 seconds. I wanted to give a shout out to the workforce. President Eng talked about all the events and how busy we've been, and it doesn't seem to be letting up. And, the workforce has been really working tremendously hard, both providing all this additional service. 5 days a week is no longer enough for a railroad worker on the Long Island Railroad. If we relied on 5 days a week, we'd have big problems. They're spending a lot of time away from their families. And while we're moving all these people to the U.S. Open, we're still doing important work in Harold to move projects along. And I'm proud of the workforce and their dedication and their sacrifices. I want to give a shout out to Dave Kubicek for keeping labor and our organization in the loop with all of the progress and all the information relative to the events as they're going on, which is helpful to us to get word out to our members and keep people motivated to work, because that's it gets harder and harder, especially in the summer, to keep people motivated to work, and right now they are, and we're eager to keep working. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. It's a good reminder to the entire board. Long Island Railroad has had an incredibly busy time and handled it incredibly well, so thank you. Additional questions? Hearing none, we'll have the safety report. I do want to acknowledge that I thought the public safety announcement was terrific, except for that one shot with the person on the tracks that just took my breath away. But that young man is to be congratulated.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Our safety report can be found starting on page 45. And just to build on the remarks earlier from President Eng, we do have a picture of Mrs. Spinella's first grade class from West Islip. Their banner is actually hanging in the Babylon train station. The slogan that they came up with through the contest is "Look left, look right, it might save your life." And just below that is a picture of Janine Saracino, who is an 8th grade student graduating from St. Aidan School in Wilston Park. Her banner is hanging in the Mineola train station. Don't be safety blinded, be safety minded. So again, we appreciate all the cooperation. This is actually our second year of doing the school safety contests. So we have a little more longevity than Metro North, but we work very collaboratively together and are working together to build the programs on both properties based on shared experiences. So we look forward to them also being able to do this contest hopefully in the future. So for the reporting period ending April 2018, our average reportable customer injury rate decreased 42% over the same period prior. I do want to invite everyone to our next customer safety awareness event, which will take place Thursday, June 28th from 3 to 7 p.m. at Penn Station. As we've discussed in the past, looking at our customer safety and our performance, Penn Station continues to be a challenge for us. And by partnering with Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, New York City Transit, during that time period, we all send the same messages to our customers about how important it is that we safely travel together. So that event will take place on June 28th with all agencies participating. Our community outreach and education partnership with MTA Police reached over 31,000 participants through the end of April. There was a 1% increase in the average reportable customer lost time injury rate over the period that we're reporting on. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? No questions? In that case, we'll move on to capital construction. Mr. Lieber.
Good morning, Chair Metzger, members of the committee. We have a CPOC. We appear on the CPOC calendar this month with Metro North to Penn and the Long Island Railroad expansion, aka third track. So I'm not going to talk about those. We'll deal with them at length. I want to talk about a little bit about East Side Access, but first of all, in response to your comment, Mr. Testor, and others, I need to tell you that the railroad's workforce is going 24/7 on the double track project, on the Long Island Railroad double track project to Farmingdale to Ronkonkoma. And the signal team that's working on that is doing it at the same time that the railroad is very effectively supporting us on East Side Access and on the third track project, and is really stretched thin. And under Phil's leadership, what was already a pretty good collaboration. And I want to say thank you to Chris, Calvagna, and to Elisa and Dave. We're really working very, very well together, and the intensity of that effort is just extraordinary, driving towards an August finish date. So just wanted to underscore that and acknowledge the work. Let's get that PowerPoint up, and I can do this quickly. East Side Access. Long Island Railroad and East Side Access forces have completed the necessary testing of the central instrument locations and signals for Harold interlocking. Over the course of this coming weekend, June 22nd through the 24th, and the July 4th weekend, the new Harold signal system and the permanent mainline 4 tracks will be put into service. This is a very significant milestone, not just for this project, but for all of us who have been looking forward to the improvements in terms of flexibility and reliability that East Side Access can and will deliver. And, you know, it now for the first time enables us to move from any Long Island Railroad line into any of the tunnels, and that flexibility will have real benefits in terms of reliability. And as I said before, at the risk of being repetitive, I just really want to acknowledge the railroad's team. In accomplishing this milestone, it took a lot of planning and making sure that when we lost weekend outages to Amtrak work and otherwise, that the railroad would adjust, and everybody really is working together very, very well to make sure all of the projects go forward. So, which brings me back to Amtrak, topic of some controversy in recent months. I think the euphemism my staff gave me was in recent months we've increased our engagement with Amtrak. I think we've been talking turkey about some of the challenges we face with Amtrak staffing of the East Side Access project. But perhaps as a result of talking about it a little more publicly, we have gotten some better results. We went from, a 30 or 40% show-up rate with Amtrak workforce. In May, we were at 40% in the work that Amtrak has to perform for the project, and 60% of the access and protection workforce for East Side Access from Amtrak showed up. So that was an improvement. And in the first 2 weeks of June, we've had a significant uptick. So we're in the 80s now in both categories. So whether it was just Amtrak's own internal process or some of our public truth-telling, I think it has had an effect.
Jana, we talked about the legal staff going back. I'm glad things are working better. That's terrific news. But we also talk, because we've had tremendous expenses here over the past time, lost work, all kinds of extras that we've incurred. We talked about going back, our legal team, and reviewing in detail, I think, Phil, the original operating agreements between the LIRR or the MTA and Amtrak, and I wondered if that's taking place and where it stands, and if it has been done, which I certainly hope it has, that what was found there.
Well, because it's a legal matter, I think we are ready to talk to you. It's probably best that we deal in a kind of an executive session function setting.
But have we reviewed this?
Yeah, the work's been done. The work's been done. We can do that at a time that's convenient for the committee.
We'll do this in an executive session, and I'll see to it that it's arranged as soon as possible.
Right, because I think this is very important as fiduciaries that we see because of the expenses that we've entailed over the years.
Jano, these much improved numbers in terms of Amtrak participation?
A month's worth of much improvement.
A month's worth.
Yeah.
But are they trending into a place where, to the extent they play into your own projections, you're starting to gain a little bit of increased comfort? I know you still had some reservations, and I understand you gave us projections with some meaningful caveats, both related to Amtrak and other things.
Yeah.
But I also don't think your projections presumed all of a sudden Amtrak would have 100% adequate participation, and we didn't want to talk about sort of publicly where you needed them to be for fear of only achieving that. But are we getting to a point where we start to firm up with the comfort level?
Yeah, if we're able to sustain the kind of numbers that we achieved in the last month, I think that it's an important factor in us being able to achieve the critical path date, which we have, again and again said that we're organizing around, which is that 2022 date. So it does give me some increased hope, but we need this to play out over a much longer period than 4 weeks.
Okay.
But to that point, what we're able to accomplish in the few weeks since this thing turned in the right direction is we actually are getting 85% of the tasks done, and it was over 80% in June as well. So what you're seeing is, for the first time in a long time, as far as I know, we're actually getting all of the scheduled work done in Harold that depends on Amtrak workforces. And that's been true for Long Island for some time. They are reliable in showing up and delivering what they've committed to, but now we're seeing it from Amtrak, and that's good. Change orders. One of the things I talked about in my report to the board a few months ago was the backlog of change orders, and I'm happy to report we are making some progress. The backlog was reduced 21% in the past month. We got some new change orders, which is not, I emphasize, proof that there are problems on the project. There are always going to be change orders on a project of this magnitude. But the fact that we're actually reducing the backlog of stuff that's been lingering, I think, is a positive sign. And we're going to keep pushing on this. As I mentioned to the committee, we created a group to focus specifically on change order management. A project of this size, sometimes you need a group that is going to grab the change orders and drive them through the process, albeit a simplified one, and we're doing that. Yeah.
So it's not only obviously about cleaning up the backlog, which is very important to keep the job running properly, but how are we doing on the pricing of these change orders? Can you comment on that?
The process is we use an estimate, we use our own estimates, and we're consistently coming in and keeping with or close to our own estimates. The key, Andrew, is, when things go awry and the change orders take a long time to resolve, frequently it's because there hasn't been good work done on the scoping of what's in a change order. Then, if you don't do a good collaborative scoping exercise, then you end up with both sides going off, doing an estimate. The estimates are miles apart, and then you spend 6 months arguing without really focusing on what are the expectations of that, of the work needing to be performed. So one of the things that I'm doing is saying we have to make sure that there is a real collaborative discussion between the contractor and us about what's the scope in a change order. Don't just go off and do an estimate and then, when you find out you're 100% apart, go to your separate corners. So we are doing things that are, I think, causing change orders to be resolved more effectively, more quickly, and hopefully at a better number. But we haven't had a problem on change order numbers exceeding estimates. As I told the committee when I did the projections about budget and schedule, we're going to have to spend some money, and that's why there's a contingency to resolve these change orders. Yes, and there's a process. Yes, absolutely. We have an executive change order committee, and anything that's at the right amount has to come through my approval in that change order committee.
Additional questions? Yes, Mr. Mordler.
Could we at some point that looks convenient to you get some data on the increased cost by reason of the change orders that have been dealt with over the past several months?
Absolutely. Well, I'll do a roll-up in the next, probably best to have it another month if you want a real perspective. Fine. So another month or so, I'll do a roll-up and submit it to the committee for review and discussion.
While I have your attention, on page 52, there appears to be an increase in the lost time injury rate. Can you tell us why that has happened now?
I can't. Be honest, if you're talking about East Side Access, it's consistently been below the standards. Bill, is there somebody who can speak to the lost time injury rate? Peter?
Good morning. There has been an uptick in April on 2 contracts, and we are looking into it. We have met with a contractor and driving initiatives to reduce it again. However, overall, the project has been consistently below the BLS national average, so we have had a very good run starting since 2014 all the way out. So
that's exactly why I wanted to know what's happened that changed that.
So there's a change of operation. We have local tree working on one of the projects, and we have some finishes that are going on. So the prime is less involved, and we have more subs involved, and the culture is slightly different. So we're working on trying to get them to subscribe to the prime's safety plans, and we're meeting with them. We have actually had a meeting last week with Tude Perini, with that executive management to address these things.
This may provide a useful opportunity to take a look at why, which with an excellent work record, excellent record on lost time injury, suddenly there's an uptick for you to figure out what is it, if anything, that was specifically responsible for it, and get back to us. It may provide you an opportunity to take a good hard look at fundamental causes, if there are any.
Will do. We do a lot of trending, and I certainly can give you that answer.
Thank you.
So since we're on the topic, very quickly, we have instituted in the last couple of months a couple programs to address the most frequent causes of injury in this particular phase of the job. A ladder program that makes it very tight control of the use of ladders, which obviously frequently, if they're misused or accidents do happen. So we require ladders to be signed out, for there to be people who are supervising the use of ladders and so on. And the other is cleaning up the walkways, which, believe it or not, frequently the most frequent cause of injury are trips and falls in the walkways that are used by the workforce. So we have done a lot that's specifically directed at the most frequent causes of injury in the job as it stands now.
I understand all that is perfectly acceptable. The only thought I had was you have this hopefully aberrational 1 month that might give you an opportunity to focus on and determine what are the kinds of things that cause it. Hopefully it'll reverse.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Jamie?
John, I have a question for you. When we do statements of work on meaningful change orders, is it generally true that the contractor is not getting paid for the upfront sort of scoping exercise to craft that statement of work?
Yes.
Have you given thought to, I will tell you in my own professional life, that was how business was conducted most of the time. And I think what you find is you get a statement of work that reflects the clients, the MTA's requirements and needs as they perceive them. And then there's often a gap even to that change order and statement of work because we don't know what we don't know. And in industries where I've seen that have moved to, even if it's modestly paid, high-level design efforts to scope at SOW, it engages the customer in a way that that teases out the requirements in a much more solid way. And I imagine optically we might collectively be opposed to paying a contractor for the creation of a statement of work, but maybe on complex ones, it's something to think about, because I think in the long run, what I've seen is it in fact saves money. I'm not trying to find new ways to compensate contractors, but I would hate to see us cut off our nose to spite our face, and it's something to at least be considered on a complex statement of work.
It's an interesting point. We are using the principle that you're talking about, which is don't ask people to do a lot of work for nothing, because frequently you'll suppress competition if you do that. We have been, on the third track project, for example, we gave them a stipend for the preparation of their bid. Mm-hmm. So in the effort to increase competition, but you're raising something that's about a job that's already awarded, and we need to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, in my own professional life, as I've said, I think we've found, and I'm on the vendor side in that case, but we found that we're actually, on the whole, sticking to statements of work then on behalf of the clients much more so. And we've also been co-opted into it. So we now bear responsibility contractually, but probably also sort of from the relationship standpoint, much more so than when we just took the unilateral requirements the client gave us and said, well, that's what you asked for. And then to Commissioner Saul's point, I think it's right. We need to go off and look at some of these things with Amtrak. But I also think we should be a little careful, and I think I was in the same sort of mind frame with him a few months ago in the heat of this, of being extremely frustrated and wanting to demand some compensation, and we should certainly look at it. But I also think the staff, Jano, you, the presidents of the railroads, should be thinking about maybe more collaborative ways to resolve that economic compensation that we might demand. Are there value adds going forward that we can partner with Amtrak on? Because it certainly does dawn on me with a cooler head. This is a 100-year project, and in 50 and 100 years, those who use it won't remember that we ran over by this. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, for this generation, stick to budgets, but it doesn't serve us so well long-term to be in an acrimonious position with Amtrak. And I'm sure there are real value adds we can find in how we interact with them and offsets and things we do with them that can probably bring more value to the customer in some cases than even getting a check back. And so we should try and be creative, I think, as a board and as a staff, and how we ultimately resolve that.
Okay.
Absolutely. I agree. I'd like to point out that I think the committee, as both committees, have been looking at agreements across the region, and so this is a good time to look at all those agreements.
So the final thing, I don't want to take up too much more time on a busy agenda, but the final thing is just to let you know one of the procurements we're bringing is to install the signal system throughout the tunnels, and it's a complicated contract. Dave Cannon will present it in a few minutes. It's going to require coordination among 5 contracts during the installation and the testing phases. We had an original bid, and there was only one bidder. I mentioned this to Mr. Saul in light of his interest on that issue, but the original bid, originally it was offered as we priced it as a change order to the existing contract, and the number was $85 million. Then we bid it, and although we got only one bid, JV, between Comstock and 5-Star, the bid was $60 million. Then we negotiated down south of 53. So while it's slightly over budget, I'm satisfied that we did a good job and addressing the committee's concerns about single bidder situations. I think we made some progress. And this is an important contract because this is the last systems contract that leads us to completion. And there's one more contract in the works. I think we've mentioned the BC tunnel approach, but then we'll be done with contracting and all the risks associated with procurement. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Anything else that the committee wishes to add? Yes.
I think since Jano's taken over here, we now have real answers, very professionally handled, and I'm speaking for myself personally, Jano. I have tremendous confidence in when you say that things are being done and you're looking at these things, that it's really being taken care of with the interest of the state of New York and not God knows who else. And I want to compliment you. I think this thing is really, I'll be very surprised if you don't bring this thing to a successful conclusion now, as messed up as it's been all along. And I thank you for the hard work that you're doing here. And I know what time you're putting into this thing.
Thank you, Andrew. I share your opinion. May we have the police report, please?
Good morning. As President Eng stated earlier, the last 10 days has been a very busy period indeed. I'd like to personally acknowledge the outstanding work performed by members of the police department and the Office of Security in working alongside our partners in the railroad, resulting in some very positive and safe outcomes for all. Crime system-wide for the month of May, felonies are down by 11. 16 versus 27. That's a decrease system-wide of 41%. For the Long Island Railroad, the railroad experienced a decrease in felonies of 30%. For the month of May, that's 7 versus 10, or down by 30%. 2 of those 7 were closed by arrest. And in Metro North experienced a decrease in felonies of 65%. For the month of May, that's 6 versus 17, or down 11, or 65%. And 3 of those 6 resulted and closed by arrest. For the hate crime report, year to date, there are 11 versus 12 hate crimes for the year. The details of all those crimes are in the book. And that concludes my report.
Questions for the chief? Hearing none, we'll move on to joint information items.
The first joint information item is the PTC report.
Debbie, will you be doing the...
I think we're going to do a tag team like we did last month.
Okay, good.
So the format of the report is the same format that we've been using for the past several months. So we've got this summary slide at the beginning. I think last time we did this, we didn't get past the summary slide, and that was okay. The good news this month is that really no significant changes from the last time that we delivered the report, really no significant changes since last month. So both railroads are highly comfortable that we'll be in compliance with all federal requirements. Integrated system factory acceptance testing is in progress. We talked at some length in the April presentation about some of the software fixes that needed to be developed for critical safety variances. Those are in the works and are under test. However, they're not all done. This is still a work in progress. So several core variances are still out there, and we're still working on fixes for those core variances. And they will not be available until August. RSD applications for both railroads. I'll just remind the committee, RSD means Revenue Service Demonstration. It's one of the 4 compliance markers for PTC compliance in the regs and in the statute. We are both confident that we will be submitting our RSD applications around Labor Day. That's the case for both railroads, and again, that has not really changed over the course of the last couple months. To the extent that we are still looking to try to place all lines in PTC operations by the end of the year, just given where we are at now in terms of some of the software issues, that remains significantly at risk. In terms of percentage completion, roughly the same. Long Island is at 75%, Metro North is at 73%. The budget is roughly $1 billion for both railroads, and Long Island's $40 million increase was approved as part of the capital program amendment that went to Albany however many weeks ago that was. So since this is the slide that has a lot of information on it, I'm just wondering if we have any questions before we sort of plow ahead.
I see none.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Nice to hear that we're pretty much on schedule as we had
as
planned.
I said, the good news is, unlike some prior months' presentations, there's really not a lot new to tell you all, and that's actually good news when it comes to PTC. So. This is the dashboard. So the dashboard hasn't changed all that much either. We've both had our spectrum for some time, though we will be coming back to this committee possibly as soon as July with a request to purchase additional spectrum. This is not strictly necessary. It's really more as a protection against interference. It just seems prudent to protect against radio interference to the extent that we can, and we had identified some spectrum that will help us. So we will be bringing that to the committee for approval shortly. Installation of hardware, roughly the same. Long Island is at 86%, Metro North at 83%. Percentage of employees trained, Metro North is a little bit ahead. We expect to be finishing up in July, but Long Island is also in pretty good shape. In terms of the various things that we are doing to get our RSD segments ready for RSD, we are in the testing mode, both of us. So again, we're roughly the same. Long Island is at 48% and Metro North at 45%. 0 for both of us in the last, because that chart will be filled in as soon as we start cutting in the other segments into PTC operation. So that those segments will begin to be filled in once we're through RSD and we get the green light from FRA to cut in additional segments. So again, these slides, you'll see this slide, you'll see a comparable slide for Metro North in the presentation. These really haven't changed all that much. The green shows when we will have sufficient hardware installed to be able to meet our FRA targets. So you see that those markers are for Long Island in September. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Deb? Okay. And then going ahead to Metro North, ours will be done in October. And then west of Hudson, which we've talked about, that we are reliant upon New Jersey Transit to get the hardware that we need to install on the wayside. And based upon the conversations that we continue to have with New Jersey Transit, they remain confident that they will be able to provide that hardware in time for us to be compliant on the Port Jervis as well. I'm going to actually kick this over to you, Jen.
Okay. So since our last report, we, like Kathy had said, we're in the middle of integrated system FAT. And the good news is that we actually resolved many of the critical variances that we had informed you about a couple of months ago. However, we still have a lot of work. We are still testing. We're still finding some, what we consider issues related to the core functionality. However, it hasn't stopped us from proceeding with factory or field testing. And a lot of the variances that we actually fixed during the last month, we were able to actually test it in the field, and we found that the corrections actually work. So that's a good thing. We achieved the final design review milestone, which was important for us both contractually and also to make sure that the designs of the hardware are subject to no changes. There might be some minor tweaks, but the hardware that we're actually installing should not change within the next few years. We continue to do our installations, our programming of the installation of the software on our trains. We also, for Long Island Railroad, we completed the first phase of our installation of our PTC cable in the Atlantic Tunnel. That's been pretty challenging considering there's been a lot of events over at the Barclays Center. So we've been working a lot of weekends and outages throughout the weekends. One of the key things that we're working on to try to catch up to Metro North is our employee training. And we did have a little bit of hiccups on our West Hempstead training line, which we've actually overcome. And I think within the last few weeks, we've actually ramped up our training. So we should see those numbers go up pretty significantly within the next few months. And lastly, one of the things that my team has been really working hard at is putting the RSD application together. And we actually had a page-turning meeting with the FRA. They gave us some really good feedback on how we can finalize it, but I think we have a pretty good plan to proceed to get us through RSD.
So Metro North, we've spoken to the committee before about civil speed enforcement and how we've cut that in as an interim safety functionality. So the good news this month is that last week we began running the M3s with CSE. So we're continuing our onboard equipment installations for the M3s at the Arch Street shop. We are working out on the RSD segment, which is between Tarrytown and Croton-Harmon. We've completed installation and configuration of the RSD segment and done pre-site performance testing there to demonstrate some of the core functions of PTC, which are temporary speed restrictions, positive train stop, accurate stop. We've been happy with the results. So it's good that we're actually seeing good performance on the RSD segment. We've begun our integrated system FAT. We're continuing to install radio cases and poles on the non-RSD segments. We, too, have achieved the final design review milestone. We're working very closely. I think you'll recall a couple months back, you approved a contract with Dayton T. Brown. They're assisting us in doing our RSD application. And like Long Island, we've been working very hard on the RSD application so that it's actually ready to go in August. And we're continuing to work with FRA to get a better understanding in terms of what they will be requiring as far as testing to be able to support the RSD application.
So the next few slides just shows the schedule. It hasn't changed all that much. You'll see certain activities, Metro North is a little bit ahead of us, and some activities we're ahead of them. But in all, we're working pretty closely together. We have 2 independent test teams. We're working every week. We have people there witnessing testing. We're running right now double shifts to maintain the schedule and also to improve the test time that we have and trying to uncover any other variances that may be in the system. So the target, as Kathy had said, is to submit our RSD application in early September and have our pilot lines in RSD, Revenue Service Demonstration, in mid-October, early mid to October. And also depends on when the FRA will review and approve our application. So far we have a commitment from them to turn around those applications within a 30 to 40-day period. So I actually just attended a FRA symposium on Friday, which was on the statutory requirements for 2018. So the FRA put together, invited all the railroads. We attended. They gave us a lot of useful information on how we can get there. One of the key discussion points was the alternative schedule. What does that mean? Like we had told you before, most railroads will be required to submit an alternative schedule because to have full PTC implementation, that requires not only all of your entire network in operation, but all of your tenant railroads to be also in PTC operations and also to have interoperability. So that's going to take a little bit longer. So some of the...
Oh, so sorry, go ahead.
Okay,
No,
sorry.
No, this is another...
I was going to go through the risks.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So the first slide is pretty familiar. I mean, the only change here is, like I said, we are running double shifts right now. We put a lot of pressure on the contract. Unfortunately, they told us they didn't have enough resources to support 24/7 days of testing, which we told them we were ready to do, but they don't have enough resources. They actually added about 9 testers between the 2 test teams, which right now of course they have to ramp up. They're new staff on the program, and it's going to take them a little time to learn the system. The other thing we did was when Kathy was and maybe she wants to talk about it, but she negotiated where BT would provide a set of servers over to Siemens to improve their testing of the OBC software, because that's a really vital piece of the system where we had a little bit of problems. And we're hoping that in parallel to the integrated system testing that we're performing in the BT integrated lab, that Siemens will also be able to fortify their test lab in order to improve the test environment so that, some of the variances that we had uncovered in the integrated lab could also be discovered in their lab as well. Kathy had already said, to mitigate some of the problems, we expect to see in the field, contrary to what maybe Amtrak and the other railroads, because of the density of operations that we have, we're in the process right now of reviewing proposals for the additional spectrum that we plan to acquire. Most of this stuff is the same from the last report, but we are working, we put a lot of pressure on Amtrak, and I do see some movement in their responsiveness. So we're actually, I know Metro North already signed off on their LOU, letter of understanding with Amtrak, and Long Island is shortly going, our target is to get those, that LOU approved within the next few weeks. And as far as the rolling out of the rest of the segments, we anticipate doing our best to deliver as many lines by the end of the year as possible. But that all relies on the success of our integrated system, FAT. So right now what we're doing is we're planning, whatever track access we need, the additional resources in order to bear down on everyone so that we can try to deliver as many lines in revenue service demonstration by the end of the year. And right now, we are also, depending on how well we do with the integrated FAT, we'll plan that out and we'll be able to present that probably in the next few months.
The last item on there is the Port Jervis Line PTC installation. Again, that all depends upon New Jersey Transit. We remain in close touch with New Jersey Transit about this. It's a compliance issue for both of us. So they are as motivated as we are to make sure that it's installed on time. So, we've had recent conversations with them. They remain confident that they will be able to get us this material in time for it to be installed by the end of the year. But we continue to monitor that as a risk issue.
I already see a question from Jamie.
I saw earlier that the vendor is providing a cloud-based RTM tracking system, which is great, and that's probably the standard in many, particularly where you have software now as a big component. I would suggest to you, though, that you look at and make sure you account for the fact that when you have that RTM, it probably ties to use cases and specifications that will include technical details of the software, which I imagine in this case is amongst the biggest security risks of this long term, are the software itself. Once that's cloud-based, you need to understand the security paradigm that they're putting around that RTM ever more so as opposed to if you had it in-house and you know the security paradigm that surrounds it. If you have technical details in the RTM, which you must, that you would not want to have out there publicly and present a security threat their exposure. So I would just encourage you to think about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why it hasn't really taken off completely. We actually still getting static updates. We had hoped to get the cloud-based solution up and running by now, but like you said, part of that is also making sure that the networks are secure. And most companies don't like to have cloud-based solutions if they have to share across their different companies.
Okay, as long as you're thinking about that. Thank you.
Point well made. Additional questions? Yes.
Regarding, well, it's actually regards Amtrak territory that Long Island Railroad operates over. I suppose once our crews are trained and our equipment is all equipped, we'll be running with PTC between Harold and Penn Station?
That's correct.
On all our trains?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So all our train, that's probably for, I guess, December or January.
Yeah. The Harold area will... is part of our interoperability requirements, is not required for RSD. So when we do the demonstration for the end of the year, it won't include that area.
But we will be operating with PTC because it's Amtrak's territory, and
Amtrak has PTC designs that still need to be completed for F Tower area over there.
So right now that area does not have PTC even for Amtrak equipment?
No.
And when do they plan to have that?
We're working the details out. I don't really know what that
okay.
is.
But I assume by...
But we all both have to be in compliance by 2020.
Okay, because they're making a lot of noise.
So that's part of our alternative schedule. That'll be laid out, and this is why we're actually, that's actually a work in progress right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to comment that I'm encouraged by the amount of interaction that you're having with the FRA and also the interactions that you're having with your various contractors. I think it's helping us to reach the goal.
I think that's right. The one thing I did want to comment on, I guess actually I wanted to comment on both of those things. I think we've gotten good cooperation and guidance from FRA recently in terms of what support they're going to be able to provide as we get closer to the end of the year. So I think that, as we continue to interact with them, we get a little bit more in the way of information with respect to what we can expect in terms of their support. The other issue is one that we've spoken about a lot, and it's I think it's the previous slide, but it doesn't even matter, this issue of resources. We've been pounding them pretty hard in terms of the adequacy of their resources, as Debbie indicated. They're now working weekends, they're working double shifts, and the other thing that we mentioned, I think, in passing, but I want to reiterate, is that we have people who are there all the time. We're sending our own people out there all the time. There are people who basically are living full-time in Pittsburgh now, and we sort of rotate people in and out depending upon their specialty and their expertise. So we are providing our own support as well as retaining our own consultants to provide additional support, and the SI is retaining consultants to provide additional support. So there's a lot of different ways of beefing up the support on this project, but because of our recognition of how important the project is, all those resources are being made available, and it's still a lot has to happen between now and the end of the year and beyond, but we're doing our best to mobilize the resources necessary to support the project through the end of the year.
There are some photos in your book.
There's a couple of slides on the look ahead, but basically the look ahead is for both common to Long Island Railroad and Metro North. So the next few months will be in integrated system FAT with hopefully with a new baseline set of software. So that's targeted somewhere in the July period, and will take about roughly a month to complete. So we're really pushing the limit as far as getting our RST application in by September. We have a lot of testing to do both in the factory and then taking that software into the field. So we're looking at ways right now to mitigate the schedule because we know there's certain requirements to meet RST, and then there's certain things in the contract that are not necessarily required. So we'll look at that and see what we can do. But right now, I'm pretty confident. I believe that both railroads will be in compliance by the end of the year. The question is how many lines will we be able to place into extended revenue service demonstration by the end of the year as well.
It's going to be a very busy summer.
Any questions? Thank you.
In that case, do you have any Metro North specific information items?
There's one information item, the license agreements for ATMs at Metro North and Long Island Railroad stations. It was added to the agenda so that the Joint Committee could be informed about the proposed license agreement with Access One Solutions to locate ATMs at 8 Metro North stations and 7 Long Island Railroad stations with the option to expand to other locations. And this will be on the agenda at Finance. It's strictly an information item for these committees.
Chuck? Your mic is not on.
Please record me as abstaining on the license agreement.
Yeah, we're not voting.
That
We're
vote
not
will
taking
be
a vote.
taken in
It's
finance, and it'll be discussed there. Metro North specific? None? President Ng?
There is one Long Island Railroad information item in the book this month, and that's the June-July track work program. Many of our key initiatives continue to progress, which require outages, mostly off-peak, but with some AM and PM peak impacts. For example, beginning this Thursday evening, track work related to East Side Access signal pre-cutover will take Main Line 4 out of service between Harold Interlocking and Woodside from Thursday night through Monday morning, June 25th. As a result, there will be AM and PM peak impacts on Friday, June 22nd as well. 2 AM peak Montauk branch trains that normally terminate at Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City, will instead terminate at Jamaica. In the PM peak, the 6:16 train from the Penn Station to Oyster Bay and the 6:02 p.m. from Penn Station to Far Rockaway will instead originate in Jamaica, with customers taking other trains from Penn Station to connect. In addition, the 6:31 p.m. train to Huntington and the 6:30 p.m. train to Hicksville will be combined. And there are other off-peak impacts associated with this project as well. The staff summary in your book has more details on these. Thank you.
And you're communicating this information
Correct,
to our
yes,
riders.
absolutely.
Thank you. Could we move on to procurements? Anthony Gardner has Metro North this month.
Yeah, good morning. There are 5 procurements this month for Metro North, totaling $8,619,908. There are no non-competitive procurements. The 5 competitive procurements total $8,619,908, and there are no ratifications. The first request is for the RFP process for design, build, delivery, and installation of DC traction switchgear at 9 Metro North, Hudson, and Harlem line stations. The RFP process is specifically being requested to afford Metro North the ability to select a contractor with the technical expertise to design, fabricate, test, and install DC traction power switchgear that is integral to Metro North's existing infrastructure of switchgear. The second competitive request for proposal process is for the design and implementation of rehabilitation and improvements to Metro North's Hartsdale and Scarsdale stations. Metro North has identified Hartsdale and Scarsdale stations as 2 stations that require immediate rehabilitation and improvement work to bring them into a state of good repair. The third competitive procurement contract award is to Conductix in the not-to-exceed amount of $3,619,908 to design, fabricate, test, and deliver third rail fiberglass brackets. The project consists of design, manufacturing, and delivery of fiberglass third rail brackets for use on Metro North's territory. And the 4th and 5th contract awards is a combined award. Well, a combined award. It is a dual award. There are 2 contract awards to the firm TRC Environmental Corporation and Environmental Planning and Management, Inc., in the total not-to-exceed amount of $5 million. That's $2.5 million to each firm, to perform on-call system-wide asbestos, lead and air monitoring and testing services on an as-needed basis. TRC and EPM have ample personnel, resources with a diverse range of experience, which encompasses the full span of services specified in Metro North's RFP. As this board of authorization shall not guarantee any one vendor a fixed amount of work, the overall budget may be reallocated as necessary to ensure most efficient and timely asbestos and lead air monitoring and testing services. May I please have a vote on these procurements?
I move these procurements. Is there a second? Thank you. Question, Mr. Mordler.
With respect to the Scarsdale and Hartsdale agreements, while you are doing this major work, have you given consideration to exploring the potentiality, the availability of transit-oriented developments at those sites?
I'm not aware that we've been approached by either of the localities in those areas with respect to TOD, but we can get back to you on that.
Let me make my point substantively. While you are engaged in doing major work at stations, is a good time, I would think, to determine whether or not TOA makes sense. It may not, but it seems like a good time to do it rather than do it after the event.
Okay, well, here comes Mike Schiffer to the rescue. He's got some information about Scarsdale.
We did meet actually just in the last couple of weeks with Scarsdale. about their large development on the large parking garage site, the Freightway parking garage site, and we're staying in touch with them to coordinate so that we can make sure that any improvements to the station are complementary to what's going on in the community. And in general, in places where we don't necessarily even own the land, we still work very closely with those communities to make sure that we're building the relationships necessary to make sure that our customers have the best possible environment to be able to connect with.
Thank you.
May I?
Yes.
Let me be clear. When I speak of transit-oriented development, I'm talking about the potentialities for housing. I'm talking about the potentiality for economic development and the like. Assuming you have the ownership or control of the area immediately adjacent to the train station, that would be the time to take a good hard look at it at the time you are redoing the work. Transit-oriented development is something that is essential, it is something that is timely, and it is something that is becoming a real fact of life throughout the entire country. Indeed, in Long Island, they have been doing it together with the Long Island Railroad for some period of time.
Yes, and we've had great success. For example, the Harrison TOD is moving along. We're working with a number of other communities.
And all I'm asking you to do is, where you are planning to do work at the station is about as good time as any to do a good examination of the issue. It's efficient and time and money saving.
We understand.
Will do.
That's a good point, and I'd like you to add that to your list of issues to raise when you have such a... Okay. Additional questions? Yes.
On B, the permission to go to RFP, I just note that in the background discussion, the first sentence there seems to suggest that maybe there aren't too many contractors that do this work. I'm not sure, but that's my question. Do we know if there's a lot or few or maybe only two? It's for the DC traction equipment.
That is correct. There's a limited pool of vendors that can do the design and build an integration that's required.
How do we know? I mean, I assume we know them, and how many are there?
I would have to get back to you on that. I don't know this.
Okay, that'd be good. I mean, in advance of this, because sometimes we see things and we see that there were only two responses, or maybe even only one, and it'd be good to know in advance before we see this that that's the case. Of Hartsdale and Scarsdale, I know there was a previous station rehabilitation, renovation, or whatever we want to call it, where we had selected the contractor. One of the main factors was because they had experience on Metro-North stations. I don't think that should be limited as a factor, but I do think it limits competition, especially in the future going forward with other contractors. And they're going to look at this and say, why should I bother submitting a bid if so-and-so already has the in? And I just think that's a bad way to go. If at all possible, let's try to bring in as many as we can.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We've gotten that message loud and clear from this committee. And this works a bit different. We're actually taking these platforms to the ground. So this is a little bit different from the work that you had seen earlier, I guess late last year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Kathy, if you remember when we did the big station renovation, you had a information meeting, I guess you called before, and you had told me that you had, I don't remember the number, 25 contractors from upstate that showed interest in the job. And apropos of this discussion that you just had, unfortunately, none of those, if I recall, were people that actually submitted a bid even after they spent the time coming down to the information meeting. So I think this point is a very, very important point, that we don't have that happen again. We need to get new contractors in here, and anything we're doing here to stifle or make them feel that they're going to not have a fair shot at the bid is really a bad thing. So I'd err really on the side of caution here on what we're doing with these stations, because this time we should get some new bidders, and some of those people that came to that meeting, that information meeting, should be invited back again.
Yeah, I don't recall whether the people who came to that meeting were from upstate, but I certainly agree with you, and I agree with the committee as a whole, that we need to do more to ensure that we have a broader pool of proposers from whom we select when we award work of this kind. I mean, these are the first two platform replacements and what is going to be a series of platform replacements because of some issues that we're having in that area. So I'm very mindful of the desire of this committee to increase competition among the people that we're selecting. So we will take that back. No, I completely understand.
These have been moved and seconded. May I have a vote? Those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Dennis will cover our procurements for Long Island Railroad.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. There are two items in this month's procurement package in the total amount of $15.3 million. There's one item in the non-competitive section in the amount of $961,000 and one item in the competitive section in the amount of $14.3 million. There are no ratifications this month. For the item in the non-competitive section, the Long Island Railroad, on behalf of itself and Metro-North Railroad, requests MTA Board approval to award two 3-year sole source contracts to Knox Kershaw in the total amount not to exceed $960,725 for replacement parts required to operate and maintain various pieces of Knox Kershaw equipment. This equipment includes 18 tie cranes, 12 ballast regulators, 2 snow fighter ballast regulators, 1 tie inserter extractor, and 1 cribber adzer. Knox Kershaw is the original equipment manufacturer of Knox Kershaw equipment and sole distributor for their replacement parts, as they do not have independent third-party distributors or manufacturers' representatives. Knox Kershaw holds all proprietary rights to their drawing specifications and other technical information for their equipment. Knox Kershaw equipment is used by the Railroad's track maintenance department, who are responsible for the maintenance and repair of rail infrastructure assets. Long Island Railroad's maintenance away repair shop maintains all equipment purchased from Knox Kershaw and requires these spare and replacement parts. Long Island Railroad continues to seek competition for all of its procurements. To that end, Long Island Railroad advertised its intent to award a sole source contract to Knox Kershaw in the New York State Contract Reporter on January 16, 2018, and in the New York Post on February 1, 2018, to seek additional potential vendors capable of providing equivalent replacement parts. No other vendor expressed interest in competing for this procurement. The item in the competitive section, Long Island Railroad requests MTA Board approval to award a competitively negotiated contract in the amount of $14,325,000 to T. Moriarty and Sons, Inc., to construct, furnish, and install a prefabricated traction power substation to replace the Meadowbrook substation, which has exceeded its useful life. This contract also includes an allowance for the removal and disposal of contaminated soil classified as hazardous waste to an approved off-site disposal facility. The Meadowbrook substation is located on Long Island Railroad's Babylon branch in the town of Freeport, an area with dense train traffic which places a greater demand on traction power system. The Meadowbrook substation was identified as deficient in the 2005 traction power load study and the power asset condition assessment. With the existing M7 fleet and the introduction this year of the new M9 fleet, energy requirements will exceed the capacity of the existing traction power infrastructure. Under this contract, T. Moriarty will design, fabricate, deliver, install, integrate, and test the modular substation, including the building enclosure, equipment, cabling, and supervisory control systems. Additionally, all site work will be performed by T. Moriarty, the modular substation building being assembled and installed on foundations constructed by them. Long Island Railroad forces will install and terminate all cable connections required for interconnecting the substation into the power infrastructure. Replacement of this aging substation will improve both system reliability and customer satisfaction. These items are submitted for your consideration and vote.
I move these items. Is there a second? Chuck, discussion.
On the Kershaw item, you indicate that you are continuing to seek competition for all procurements. And my question to you is the following. As far as I can tell, all that happened here in order to seek competition was an advertisement or some release to the New York Post and a publication in the State Contract Reporter. Why is it that the Long Island Railroad does not follow the procedure consistently followed by New York City Transit, which is to seek out and communicate with potential competitors?
Those conversations do take place between our engineering department and our procurement department. There are certain instances, however, where it's known industry-wide that certain manufacturers and providers of materials are the sole proprietary owner of those drawings and specifications for the specific equipment that we own. When we have these conversations with the marketplace, the investment that some companies would need to make in order to provide the parts that we have is not worthwhile for them in order to make a profit. So their entry into the marketplace is somewhat limited based on their ability to have on-hand capital to redesign, tool up to manufacture the parts for purchases that happen on a rather infrequent basis. Large-scale opportunities for other manufacturers where there's a better opportunity for them to make an inroads into the marketplace, those conversations get more detailed. But in these situations where we're spending, under $1 million over 3 years, the investment that a company would need to make in order to get entry into that marketplace is somewhat prohibitive.
When I joined this board some 8 years ago, the then vice chair of the board made the point repeatedly that sole source contracts are great where you have to have them, but where you can stimulate competition, that's a good thing. That is exactly what New York City Transit has been doing, and it's exactly what the Long Island Railroad has not been doing. And that's an issue that is the subject of, or going to be the subject of, the procurement task force. It just doesn't make sense. It's paternalism at best, and it's a destruction of an opportunity for competition. It seems to me that just because you've done business with these folk for the last umpteen years doesn't mean they're giving you the best deal. It doesn't mean that there isn't a better deal available somewhere. It doesn't mean that we cannot increase competition and thereby get a better deal. And my point is that while I will vote for this, it seems to me that it is in the public interest to try to stir up competition. The likelihood that somebody's going to see it in the New York Post is somewhere between 0 and minus. But the fact is, if you reach out, as New York City Transit does as a matter of habit and has for some time, to see if you can find people who might be interested in it, that's how you get competition. And I strongly recommend that you try to do that.
Additional questions? Yes, Ira?
Yeah, just briefly on the award for T. Moriarty and Sons. I noticed that there were 3 responders to this RFP. I suppose that's the same people going to respond to the Metro North. That's probably
Yeah, that's probably correct. At that, and we'll also do further outreach to see if we can drum up, as we were just discussing, more interest.
So I mean, this is essentially this is at least partially the answer to my question I asked before.
And just as information, T. Moriarty.
Thank you.
As information, T. Moriarty is a new player in the marketplace, so we are getting new competition.
Anything else? In that case, those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. David?
Good morning. Capital Construction's procurement package this month totals $61.9 million and begins on page 120. There are no non-competitive items. There are 3 competitive items this month. The first item requests the board approve the award of a contract to the joint venture of 5-Star and LK Comstock in the amount of $52,990,000 for signal installation and testing for the East Side Access Project. In June 2017, the board authorized a request for a proposal for the work under this contract. The RFP was publicly advertised in various periodicals and on the MTA website. One proposal was received, and that was the proposal for 5-Star and LK Comstock. MTACC performed a market survey to determine why there weren't there wasn't more competition on this procurement. The primary reasons received was that the technical and contractual interfaces with the work of adjacent ongoing contracts added layers of complexity, and given the schedule and access restraints, made the contract extremely challenging and risky. MTACC reviewed the proposal by Five Star and LK Comstock and found it acceptable. Negotiations were held, and the negotiations resulted in a reduction in price from the original proposal of $59,397,200 to an agreed-upon cost of $52,990,000, a total reduction of $6,407,200. The agreed-upon cost is within 6.7% of the MTACC's estimate of $49,650,000. The second and third items request the approval of modifications to the East Side Access GCT Concourse and Facilities Fit-Out Contract to increase the allowances for asbestos and lead abatement and structural steel repairs. The total for these items are $1.6 million and $4.4 million, respectively. These three items are submitted for your consideration and vote.
I move these items. May I have a second? We'll work our way up. Chuck.
Thank you. I'm focused on the Five Star and Comstock thing. I note that both of the contracting companies have a significant adverse incident report indicating misconduct over a period of relatively recent years, and that one of them, Five Star, had imposed on it by the former president of Capital Construction a independent assessor or monitor, but that there is none for GCT, pardon me, for Comstock. Can I ask why?
Jano, who would like to answer that?
This is before I got here, so I'm going to have to defer to David. Why is there no monitor? Evan, is there no monitor on Comstock?
I can't tell you why there is no monitor on Comstock, other than that a responsibility hearing, if required, would have been held and one would have been selected. I can also just add to you that LK Comstock works on our other ESA contracts, that ESA as a program has monitors in place, or we have a contract in which we employ monitors to review all of our contracts. So Comstock is being, for the work that they're doing on ESA, they are being checked. There's no separate monitor.
Let me be clear. The report specifically says that there is none here.
There is none specifically assigned to LK Comstock. I'll come back to you and tell you, Evan, why that decision was made.
Evan,
I think we need a full report on who gets monitors, who doesn't, and what you're doing in addition to specific monitors. I think we're becoming confused.
So when the MTA becomes aware of significant adverse information, we typically have a responsibility hearing for that contractor, in which New York City Transit's vendor relations department, again, this is with our MTACC contracts, participates with us, and we make a determination in that case whether or not a monitor is required. I don't know about LK Comstock. I can only assume, and that's a mistake to make. I will come back and tell you what happened there. But when a monitor is required, we implement one. If we determine that it's not required, we don't. And then we have the secondary precaution of having our own sort of watchdogs look after them.
Evan, I'm not arguing with you on it. All I want to do are two things. A, understand when, how, and why. And secondly, I want to monitor for these because Dragados' record is one that merits a monitor, and Dragados owns Comstock.
So let me look at the situation, and then I will get in touch with you and let you know what's going on there.
I think the overarching thing here is helping us to understand what criteria result in a monitor or do not result in a monitor, and that needs to happen offline.
And I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. I think Veronica was next, unless you have something else,
I have
Chuck.
a question. Is GCT on the table now or not? I mean,
Yes.
are we talking about it? I have a question on GCT. I can yield gladly to Veronica if she has an issue on the other one.
Go ahead with GCT,
Why don't I be
please.
a gentleman for a change?
Oh.
Thank you, Commissioner. In April, this joint committee approved modifications to GCT contract constructors totaling $1.85 million. And there was a prior modification of $14 million at that time. And this committee, we're being asked to modify 2 more contracts to GCT and then ratify another modification. Why is the scope of work changing so much? How many modifications is this at this point? Why is there yet another series of modifications for us to approve for this work?
If I can just generally, I think Dave will answer on the specifics, but the GCTC is this is the concourse contract, right? And I said when we did our review and talked about it that we were dissatisfied with the progress on the contract, and some of that was backlog change orders, which had resulted in stop work orders of one kind or another. Some of those mods needed to be negotiated. Some of them just need to be pushed forward. There are different mechanisms, but the bottom line is you are going to continue to see changes to this contract because I am trying to push through all the issues that are holding this work back. And some of those are change orders that, in fairness, are going to cost money, and we accounted for that in the budget and project. It's really a forecast that I gave you a couple months ago. So, Jason, we'll get into the specifics, but you are going to see changes, AWOs, mods on these contracts because that's part of getting this job done and going and resolving the issues.
So, David, in your answer, can you let us know how many modifications we're up to and then what the projected cost increase, Jana, that you just spoke of, the projected estimate you envision for this work?
Let me just jump in.
I suspect the projection is something that they will need some time to figure out.
Right. So I can the modifications that you're seeing this month for GCTC, there are really 2 of them. One is some additional allowance items to address asbestos and other hazardous materials that are sort of wrapped around pipes and within the concourse. This is a former train yard. We didn't do complete surveys of those areas prior, and so we're encountering conditions that weren't expected. The other allowance item is to increase the ability to make repairs for leaks within that facility and to repair structural areas that have been damaged by water. Within the train shed, there were not complete surveys done before this contract was awarded. So these are not fixed numbers, but as they encounter damage or water leakage, they go in and they repair them. That's what you're seeing there. The other mod is for the 45th Street entrance. That's the old building that the MTA used to occupy. It's now being redeveloped. I think there's a deal with Boston Properties, and part of that development package is to have an entrance, a transit-oriented entrance into that building. We've had to make some modifications to our structure to allow that to happen. So that's one, a modification that was really not anticipated at the time, not ready at the time of award. We have a bunch of different types of modifications. The ones you saw last month and the month before were structural steel modifications that were necessary to deal with conditions within the yard that were, again, not anticipated. So we can get back to you on how many there have been. Not sure we can anticipate the total cost of all of them going forward, but we can give you an idea of what's coming in the future.
But there is, just to underscore, I showed it in the slide earlier, there are 300 backlog change orders just for this one contract. So you're going to see continued as we pass through all of this month by month. You're going to see a lot because we're resolving issues. And, you know, as I discussed before, a lot of these backlog change orders were ineffectively scoped. People do different estimates, and then they say we're a million miles apart, and then they go back to their corners and don't resolve it because they disagree. We're forcing a resolution, and that's necessary to move the project forward.
Currently,
As far as cost, let me just say that there were responsible assumptions made in the projection that I gave you, which is $1 billion more than the budget had been, for the cost it will take to resolve all of these issues. I don't know how much. I don't think it's probably appropriate to get, at least in a public setting, to get into how much was assigned to which contracts, but we had made appropriate provision for resolving those issues.
Jenna, the expectation is that you will maintain the budget that you presented to us.
Yeah, and that is, as I said, the resolution of these change orders is in that budget.
With regards to your comment, Evan, about asbestos surveys not being done, is that not standard operating procedure for those sorts of surveys to be done as part of this work?
So it depends. I mean, that predates me, but I can tell you that Madison Yard was an active train shed. And so whether or not they had the access at the time, I mean, I can only speculate to do the kinds of surveys that would have been necessary. We were not aware of all of the asbestos and hazardous materials. And we've done, on the leak allowance, we've as the board knows, we've experienced water infiltration issues on other projects that has led us to go back and make sure that doesn't happen again. We've done more complete surveys now, and we're finding more areas. And again, Madison Yard was not a watertight structure to begin with, and it's now going to be a beautiful concourse, and so we're very concerned about protecting that area. So we've gone back and done additional surveys, identified additional potential areas where we prevent leaks, and so the estimate is a little bit higher than had originally been included in that contract allowance.
Commissioner, the amount of change orders right now is 164. As General said, there'll be more coming. Some of them are issues that will turn into change orders. Some of them might go away. As far as, again, as Evan mentioned, the access, did not have access to all the areas to do the surveys for the asbestos and lead. So that's why the number is higher than what was originally anticipated.
Chuck.
Let me follow on what Veronica has said. And I'm looking at mod number 162 in particular, which is the yards. Clearly you had access to your own yards. But let's look at the number and understand where we are. This started out at $404 million. Nickel here, nickel there, and you're talking about real money. It then goes to $428, and it's now up to $446. We're talking about $40 million worth of orders. My concern is the same as Ms. Vanderpool's. It seems to me that one of the things that Commissioner Reckler's task force has been looking at and is looking at is how you anticipate these kind of things to the extent you can, how you can do the surveys. Madison Yard is clearly something that's under the control of the MTA.
Commissioner, when I said access, they didn't have access to all the locations within the yard because of equipment and other things that we were not able to get into those areas as we are now because everything has been moved out. As far as the amount of change orders, the 404 was the original contract award amount. However, there was $24 million worth of options also that were included as part of the contract, but were not exercised at the time for various reasons. Access reasons, could have been funding reasons, but the board originally approved the $428 million for the original contract.
Still $20 million.
Understood.
All right. My point is very simply and solely this. I can't say today what someone should have done X number of years ago. But it seems to me that one of the things Commissioner Reckler's task force I know has been looking at and ought to focus with this as an example is the extent to which we can do work in advance that is more thorough to determine what our potential exposure is in terms of cost. And it seems to me that this provides a good example of what shouldn't happen in the future.
I think you have an issue.
Yes. As you know, I've been very concerned with some of the contracts previously that have been sent on East Side Access to the board that were clearly marked as competitive, but in fact they really weren't competitive. At least substantial part of the contracts were not competitive. And one of the people obviously was Five Star that we had talked about many times at previous meetings. So I want everybody to get a heads up. I am going to call for an investigation by our inspectors general of Tuda Perini's contracts, Five Star contracts, and other contracts that were sent to the board that were marked as competitive but really weren't competitive. And unfortunately, I don't know, but there was a very unfortunate article in the New York Post on Sunday on just this item this past Sunday. So at the board meeting, I wanted to give everybody a heads up. I'm going to ask for an official investigation by the Inspector General of these contracts that have occurred in the past at East Side Access. As far as this contract here, I have spoken in depth, the one that we're going to vote on now with Jano Lieber. We've gone through all the details of the contract, and I am prepared with some reluctance to vote for this contract because I realize that I think this has been negotiated pretty fully, and we don't want to hold up the project, East Side Access. But the past here has to be investigated and looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. In the event that there are no other issues, I would like to have a vote. Those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. Now, the monthly reports.
Commissioner, we still have 2 ratifications.
Got too excited here.
There are 2 ratifications this month. The first requests ratification of a mod in the amount of $1,990,000 for the East Side Access GCT Concourse and Facilities Fit-Out Contract to revise the LIRR concourse layout to facilitate the future construction of an entrance at 45th Street. The second requested ratification of a mod in the amount of $1 million to the midday storage yard for East Side Access for the construction of a raised platform, gate, and access stairways. These items are submitted for your consideration and vote.
I had intended to move all of these items, but I'll move it again. Is there a second? Those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
For both railroads, the monthly reports on operations, finance, ridership, and capital programs are in the book, if anyone has any questions on those.
Hearing none. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, I see. Yes, indeed. Those in favor? Thank you very much.